One other thing which I think is exciting for Promethium and Acceldata is that data observability at the inception of creating new data pipelines, right? That concept which build it like the first time, right? So if you're going to build the fabric and build the products, use observability to be metricating and testing as you're building.
Before you go into production.
Before you go into production.
Welcome to the Data Fabric Show, where we celebrate the industry leaders, practitioners, and experts at the forefront of creating a modern data experience for everyone in an organization. Here's your host, Kaycee Lai, founder of Promethium.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys are. My name is Kaycee Lai. I am your host for the Data Fabric podcast show. And joining with me here is my good friend, Ramon Chen, the Chief Product Officer of Acceldata. Ramon, welcome.
Thanks, Kaycee. Great to be here. And we're in fabulous Singapore.
Look at that. You see the awesome Marina Bay Sands Hotel in the background. So Ramon and I just happen to be in the same country at the same time. So we thought, why not do a podcast actually in person?
That's right. Exactly.
How cool is that? I'm adopted Singaporean. Ramon's actually Singaporean.
Well, I'm actually originally came to school in Singapore, but I was born in the UK.
There you go. All right.
Now I live in San Francisco.
We all have roots somewhere here, right? So no, this is awesome. I'm excited to talk to Ramon. I've known Ramon for a number of years when he was at Reltio, and he ran products and marketing at Reltio. And so, Ramon, I mean, you've got a very interesting career as, well, you're not a typical chief product officer, right? Most chief product officers, they just start traditionally in engineering or say the product management discipline.
That's right.
You've done that, but you've also dabbled in marketing.
Yes.
A lot of times in marketing, which I think is fantastic because you have to think about, well, what are we building and like who is it for and how do we explain that to people, which I think is super important. But then I learned a couple of weeks ago, you actually spent some time in the dark side and actually sold for a while. So
for a while as well,
maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, as you said, the traditional path is engineering and product management, chief product officer. I did go that route. I started off as an engineer for many years. And then I got into product management because I was frustrated with the fact that we weren't selling a fabulous product that I helped build. So
I'll take matters into my own hands.
I'll take matters into my own hands. And the video marketing said, hey, you should do product management. And I said, well, what the heck is product management? And he described it, and I thought it was interesting. So I became a product manager. But then I realized that product management has limitations. You have to have good product marketing. And so product marketing is the outbound side of things and taking the technology and formulating it to messages that are really appealing for the audience and mapping the business value, which is the absolute key, right? So I did that and then eventually got to learn marketing, became a chief marketing officer. And then the diversion was I worked for a very early stage startup of which everybody had to carry.
They have to do everything.
Just like yourself, right? They see in terms of helping sell.
Yeah.
So I did it for a year. I was running products, doing alliances and selling to Dell actually, and closed the deal. Was decent enough, but not enough to put on the payroll. And then that's when I had the massive empathy for salespeople and all they go through. So you sales guys out there, more power to you.
Lots of respect.
And that's why everything I do aligns with outbound as well as inbound.
Is anyone going to buy this?
Is anybody going to buy it? Yeah. You go that they will come is not really true.
No, and I think that is so key in a lot of products. We often get so enamored by how cool it is because we're technologists.
Absolutely.
And we kind of forget that, oh my God, is someone actually going to use it? Or are they actually going to pay money for it? But at the end of the day, there's still a business to be run, right? So there needs to be money coming in. So I think that actually is a very important concept. Kind of similar experience where, I started off from finance into sales and then somehow got into product management because I was frustrated. They weren't building the products that I could sell, right?
There you go. Works that way.
I got a number to hit, man. So I was at an early stage startup and the CEO actually originally hired me as CRO. And I, after 3 months, I broke it to him in the board. You ain't got jack to sell, man. We're not selling this.
Oh, sorry.
But here's the good news. Like if we did A, B, and C, we could have something and here's the data to prove it. And so he's like, hey, I think I have a great idea. I mean, you should run product management.
There you go.
So I did do that for, gosh, almost 3.5 years.
Mhm.
A lot of empathy for the product management side.
There you go.
Writing good job requirements not as easy as it seems.
That's
And Scrum meetings, running good Scrum is that easy.
Exactly.
But like, I think one of the things that was hard was I'm arguing with myself all the time, right? Because I'm like, well, I know if I have this, I can close the deal. And then on the product side of my brain, like, yeah, Kaycee, that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
You shouldn't do that.
Exactly.
So I think it's always fun, but it's always interesting kind of getting that balance, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you've had all those experiences and you've been at Acceldata, which is, why don't you tell people what Acceldata is?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Acceldata is data observability. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term, it's pretty hot right now. It's a pretty hot category. In fact, Gartner says that the most number of inquiries that they receive beyond AI is data observability.
Wow.
So we're seeing a lot of interest. What is data observability? Well, data observability is the ability, exactly as it sounds, to be able to see data moving throughout your enterprise through orchestration, through pipelines, through the different repositories, data rest, data movement. But ultimately, it's looking at the reliability of the data, improving the quality of the data, but not in the traditional sense, right? So when you think of data quality,
the traditional things like catalogs or
catalogs, well, they think also the data quality correction tools where they're fixing data values.
More governance side of things.
More governance side of things. But really, the process for having good data quality happens way upstream, right?
Yeah.
Where this concept called shift left, right? And I recently wrote a blog post about shift happens, right? Which is all the
check it out.
There you go. And it's talking about dealing with the data at the point of entry because it can be 100 times more expensive if you address it further down the pipeline because of all of the processing and all of the issues in terms of quality. So data observability is about keeping tabs on that, setting rules and policies, primarily to benefit data engineers so that they can troubleshoot and have RCA and resolve issues faster. But increasingly, it's not the whack-a-mole that you have these days where a problem comes and a business user finds out and they screen the data engineering and the engineering scrambling to fix it. It's very much more proactive, especially with AI, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But anomaly detection and things like that really come to the fore.
Yeah.
All like
schema drifts.
So the data reconciliation, quality, and so forth. The other thing about observability, I'll just add, is that it also concerns itself with cost, right? How expensive it is to use certain tools, how efficiently are you using it? Are people running inefficient queries? So having quality and health, cost, and now increasingly looking at the lineage is examining the data value. So when you have cost, you have health and quality, and you have value, then you have the perfect mix, right, of balance of your data supply chain.
Got it. No, it's definitely a hot topic. I hear it with my customers all the time, right? When people think about building data products, right, Promethium, or they want Gen AI, they want that fast self-service.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you want to get anything into production, right, there comes a pipeline. Then when you come to the pipeline, people need to know, like, hey, what happens? I think one of the myths is that people assume that everything just magically happens. Like, pipelines don't break, right? Or they think like,
That's right.
Well, my data warehouse is so robust, there's no way my pipeline can break, or my ETL tool is so robust.
That's right.
And I think you kind of brought a good point, Ramon, that is there's so many factors, so many variables involved, right? It's, you don't know who's changing things upstream.
That's right.
Sometimes you can't even control that, right? So you really need to have that visibility end to end. And the interesting things I'm starting to see that's interesting in the market is, before, I would say in the early days of observability, was really much focused on what had already happened.
That's right.
And I think what's interesting now with AI, what you guys are doing and kind of a little bit of where the data fabric is going is, what if you can see the whole picture? What if you can see things before it happens?
That's right.
During and after, and then being able to say, well, if we actually can remediate live and see what happens, like, wouldn't that be a lot more streamlined, right? And be able to troubleshoot and proactively fix it before they happen.
Yeah, in fact, Gartner has called data observability proactive data quality.
Yeah.
And interestingly, sort of the magic quadrant for augmented data quality has 21 mentions of data observability.
Wow.
And Gartner's point is that if you're not thinking about data observability, you're really not tapping into the next generation modern data quality, which is effectively what's needed in order, because there's the V's, right? Volume, velocity, variety, and veracity, I mean, they are still evident.
Mhm.
And when you shift left, one of the things about Acceldata, which I loved as why I joined the company, is that the volumes are high when you shift left because there's more data that hasn't been culled down right to the curator and the master.
Your universe went from just here to this, right?
Exactly. And so at Acceldata, we're dealing with petabytes of data, and monthly we process exabytes, and it's just increasing more and more. And the type of data is no longer just structured,
Right.
It's unstructured data, it's streaming data. So that's the exciting part of it, I think.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think is pretty exciting is if you guys follow me, you know that I'm all about data fabric and active metadata.
Yes.
Active metadata has been a very hot topic recently because of Gen AI.
Exactly.
Right? It's been seen as a way to offload prompt engineering, but also as a way to, through active metadata, the prompts actually tell the LLMs not only where to find things, but how to build things, which becomes very interesting. It's something that we've implemented at Promethium. And so I remember talking to our good friend Mark Beyer,
That's
partner, and I'm so proud that we've got all active metadata up to Watson. I'm telling you, telling Mark, we totally have all the levels of active metadata. And Mark pulls up his famous, I've got, there's 5 levels. You've seen that, right? There's 5 levels of active metadata.
Yeah.
And he goes through them and I'm like, boom, I got 1, boom, I got 2, boom, I got 3. And that 4. And I'm like, I don't have 5. Right? And the funny thing is to get to 5 was actually around if you had observability integrated with active metadata.
Exactly.
Then you can not only see what's happened, but you can actually take action on. So it was amazing because you and I have been having this conversation for a while.
Yeah.
Like we could bring, something like active metadata with Promethium data fabric with Acceldata. And it was awesome because Mark was like, that's what you're missing. If you want all 5 levels of active metadata, that is what's important. And I think that story comes even more important with Gen AI.
Exactly.
Right. You guys maybe talk a little bit about kind of the cool stuff you guys are doing with Gen AI.
Yeah, there's multiple things with Gen AI. Right? First, we're using Gen AI to improve data observability as a function itself, right?
So checking
itself and using sort of the patterns for anomaly detection to make the tool itself better. Then we're also using sort of ChatGPT style interactions for user interfaces so that people can ask questions about their data, right? So same thing that you've done with Promethium. People don't want to write SQL anymore, really.
Right.
I mean, they really want to just say, show me what are the rules that have been violated, which is the most quality asset.
Yeah.
Or the magic question is, which dashboards using what columns and fields that you're curating upstream, and what's the downstream? What's the downstream impact in dependencies? So once you know that, then you have a framework for data observability because Acceldata Engine is also a universal alert mechanism to notify various personas in the data supply chain. So if something breaks, you immediately can say, oh, look, marketing is dependent on this piece of information. So their reports and or their lists might not be as good. Immediately generate the ticket to go repair and remediate, and this is the fastest way you can fix it. And then the chief data officer, which we'll come to in a second, can be notified as well, right? CMO is not going to be happy with you. You're going to do something about this, right?
No, that's very cool. And I think that's one of the things that I've been looking forward to, right? And working with Acceldata is like, hey, what if we can kind of take what Promethium has done in terms of the Gen AI piece, in terms of discovery, in terms of being able to build data products and actually execute the queries and say, hey, what if you can treat Promethium as a source, right? As a source pipeline as well. And through that, right, if something is wrong, you can actually ask Promethium or Acceldata, how do I fix it?
Exactly.
And through Promethium, you can actually make the changes there in real time.
Exactly.
I think that's pretty cool.
Self-healing.
Self-healing.
Something to get to.
We got to get our engineering team talking. Brother.
Yeah.
Cool. So speaking of chief data officers, CDOs, you and I talked to a lot of them, spent a lot of time with them, good friends with a lot of them. I've seen a lot of things change a lot in that role over the last, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is. And I think in the last year or so with Gen AI, I've seen it change even more. And I think it's going to change even more to come, right? So I've seen them go from a defensive position. I remember when GDPR started coming out, they were starting to rage, but they were kind of kept there to make sure you didn't get in trouble.
That's right. Yeah.
And then once the whole GDPR thing kind of died down a bit, I think people started wondering, well, is there an offensive move for these guys? Can they help generate revenue? And that's where you start seeing like a shift in the type of people who took on roles.
That's right.
You start seeing a lot of churn. It's hard for me to see on the sidelines a lot of CDOs where the average tenure is 27 months. And I actually think a lot of those probably even less than that.
Yeah.
And a big part of that I find is that they spend a lot of time trying to cobble together so many different products, which is hard. Each of them can take 18 months to implement. Then you have Gen AI come, and it's a completely different paradigm shift, right? Because a lot of the things that used to be done by the data teams, and I'd say teams plural, multiple people, are now being demanded by a single persona, right? The business user.
Right.
And the data stack isn't built for that right now, right? So I'm seeing a lot of excitement, but also a little bit of confusion here on how are we actually going to deliver results and deliver data products to the business's demand for agility. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think the CEO under fire, is a thing, right? They did a great job with getting sort of GDPR sorted, but now the CEOs are asking, where's my sort of business impact? And how will I show value for money? And data observability, as I mentioned previously, the cost equation is an important one because you're spending a lot of money on Gen AI. So are you delivering the outcome? So what is the value of what the high quality data that you're producing and delivered to the business user? Is it turning into something real? And how do you justify that? And how do you do it in the most efficient manner, right? Because companies who have thousands and thousands of pipelines built over a number of years, including some on Hadoop, premises all cloud, right? They need those things to be operating functionally and delivering.
And you're not migrating everything.
They're not migrating everything over, right? And so you need that level of observability. So I think it's chief data officers finally will be able to see. I think they can't answer the questions today because without data observability, they're kind of blind. Right. So they're kind of relying on sort of statistics from each of these siloed products, claiming victory in each stage of the data pipeline.
But not the whole.
Not the continuum, right? So I think that that's what CEOs can get out of this. It's finally be able to have the visibility to communicate then back to their CEOs and to their company and to get everybody on the same page. There's a lot of arguments between business and IT because business always views IT as not being responsive enough, right? And IT views business as always asking for too many things.
Or maybe your questions were not explicit enough, clear.
Exactly.
Questions are not clear enough. So
it's not. Yeah. So active metadata actually is the lingua franca to me. It's the ability for now for everybody to say, look, this is what's happening based upon these pieces of metadata. We can combine to frame a picture and then take action.
Well, and a big part of the metadata is the actual usage, right? It's the usage and the crowdsourcing. So you get a level of comfort in that it's actually based on reality, right? Not just someone somewhere in the governance team added some metadata. I've said this before. I said that in my talk at the MIT CD IQ show and before. I think the number one challenge to successful Gen AI adoption is being able to trust the data, right? Make sure the data is accurate, has relevant context. And it's funny because I was preparing for that show and I was like, God, I need a slide on that. So I Googled up top challenges for Gen AI adoption. And funny enough, there's actually a Gartner slide, right? There's a Gartner survey, 2024, right? CIO survey. And number one, it was trust the data, accuracy, right? Reliability. Like, prove to me how this actually happens, right? Give me that transparency. Because Gen AI is fantastic. I'm giving you something fast and it looks pretty good, but it doesn't tell you how it got there, right? And so I think this is where in pre-Gen AI, we've always had that level of transparency, right? Here's a lineage, right? Here's my model. Here's all the transformation that I did. And I think we now need that in the age of Gen AI. So this is where I think the combination of active metadata and data observability is pretty cool. You will get that continuum, right? And ultimately that builds better data products. That builds better because you get better data quality.
You get better data quality. You're able to meet the SLAs and the contracts of the data products. I would suggest that you and I have chatted about this, right? Is that many people are thinking now data observability to instrument observe existing pipelines or legacy pipelines. But actually, we're hearing and seeing what people lean forward and saying, I actually want to put in data observability first to understand my landscape before I decide what to catalog, right, and what to govern. Because there's a little bit of a mini backlash right now on people are over cataloging, over governing. and not seeing the value and tying the two together.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who are making decisions about catalogs and or their data governance policies are actually implementing data observability first,
Totally makes
because it's almost like a health check, a diagnostic.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I see all the time. It surprises every customer who uses Promethium, and that is, I didn't know I had all this stuff that no one was using.
Right. So sitting there.
Right. It's just sitting there like, why do I have all these features disabled? Now, it's just sitting there. It could be a treasure trove,
or it could be garbage.
It could be garbage, right? Like, why are we storing? Oh, it could be risk factor, right?
That's
why are we holding on to all this stuff? And a lot of it is pretty telling. Like, hey, no one's touched this in 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. Or did you know that in the last 3 months, 80 or 90% of all the questions that people are asking, it hits these like 6 to 8. Right. And so if you're going to focus on quality, I'm a big believer in like fast wins, bang for your buck, right? You could try and clean up all 5 million tables, but if you know 80% is hitting the top 6 or 10,
that's right.
I think you'll get the most bang for buck by starting there, right?
That's exactly.
And you can deliver returns back to the business a lot faster.
Yep.
So I think that's a huge one for CDO.
I think also one of the other things that we're seeing a lot of with data observability is modernization, right? So migrating to the cloud from Hadoop, let's say, and such. And the first thing
you don't want to migrate junk.
You want to migrate junk, right? So the first thing is you install data observability and something like Promethium, you can skin it down.
Yes.
Right. And then that just makes it leaner. And then data observability has this capability called data reconciliation, which will do a checksum, if you will, right? To make sure that the things that you're moving over. And then with the cost analysis and the optimization analysis, the compute analysis, you can actually see and tell whether or not the shift is even worth your while. That's the key thing, because I mean, Adam Rothfeld at Gartner is big on FinOps, cloud migrations, and he talks a lot about, not all workloads are going to move to the cloud.
Right. No, they should.
Yeah, nor should they, right? So I think
that's like nirvana in a way, because I think a lot of organizations I talk to, managing costs is a real thing. And there's a lot of awesome cloud data warehouse out there that just instantly scale up and give you unlimited compute that you need. And while that's awesome, and for some use cases totally warranted, what we've seen in real life is that there's some bad queries out there. Should you do an $8 million inner I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe, but I would think about it. And so the reason why I think the data observability comes in is right before you build a data product, you execute. If you can understand the cost impact, like you could do an 8 billion row join it. You could consume all these resources. How important, first of all, do you even know this is good?
Right.
And that's where I started talking to a lot of folks where they start to have a different paradigm shift. That is, we've always ran, our workloads, be it tester or QA or production, basically the same compute cluster for the most part, right? You don't know it's good, but you're consuming the money, right? Doesn't it make sense to say, well, before I know it's good, I'm going to try and run it, in something lower cost, or it's an 8 billion row inner join. It's just, do people really need it? I think is the question that you get to now push back to the business. That I can do it for you. It's just going to cost you $30,000 for me to do this. If you believe it's worth the value, rock on, let's do it. But first, let me just let you know what the impact would be.
Yeah, and I'll extend on that to say that what you find with data observability is not just the 1 or 2 queries that might be inefficient. Because you're dealing at the enterprise level, you may have different groups and different organizations running the same query multiple times.
Oh, yes.
And
concurrently.
Yeah, concurrently, and not knowing that it could be consolidated and cached, or it can be just stored as, like weekly snapshot and shared,
or it could be rewritten,
or it should be rewritten.
Yes,
exactly.
No, these are all very, very valid things.
Yeah, and then one other thing which I think is exciting for Promethium and Acceldata is that data observability at the inception of creating new data pipelines, right? That concept, which build it right the first time, So if you're going to build the fabric and build the products, use observability to be metricating and testing as you're building.
Before you go into production.
And even when you then separate development and production environments and you're running on a cadence, you can continuously test the development and before the efficiency of it before pushing into production. So you're really, again, going back to that Gartner term, proactive, rather than waiting for it to break or keeping your fingers crossed that nothing bad happens.
Well, it's reactive, right? And there's a cost to being reactive, right? The problems already occurred, costs already occurred, and how often are you keep letting that happen, right? So I think this makes a ton of sense. Ramon, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, tremendous.
And to do this together.
I know it's Singapore no less, right?
Singapore.
What are we doing for dinner?
I think we gotta get some chili crab. I mean, that was the only thing missing here was plate of chili crab, plate of Korean. Right.
Wow, I'm so good on the deal.
That's right. So maybe some milk tea to go along with that, right?
Follow up some.
Lots on the side. That would have made this perfect.
Exactly.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
No, my friend. Thank you so much for having me on.
And everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the Data Fabric Show, and look forward to seeing you guys next time.
That's all for this episode of the Data Fabric Show. Join us next time for more insights on what it means to create a modern data experience for everyone in an organization. Search for The Data Fabric Show on your podcast platform of choice. Visit promethium.ai to learn more.